Software testing is arguably the end of the software lifecycle. It's the end of the software lifecycle in that you have defined your product through your user stories, you have designed it, and now you have implemented it, and now you're testing it, right? Now remember, in the agile process, you're doing this little bits at a time at a sprint. But at some point, arguably at the end of your product development, you're going to do what's called a system level test case, in which you're going to test to ensure that the requirements that were stated by your stakeholder are actually held up by the product that you created. So when you think about software testing is to ensure that the system meets the requirements, responds correctly to inputs, functions in acceptable time, is usable, can be installed and used in the intended environment. As an example, at one point we were creating software for the military, and it was all well and good that the software could be executed within an air-conditioned, clean space. However, the software needed to be transitioned to the desert and used in desert settings. So you needed to make sure that not just the software, but the hardware in which it was being executed could sustain and endure the high heat and sand and all those kinds of things. You also need to make sure that it gives the results that the stakeholder desired. A study conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in 2002 revealed that bugs cost the U.S. economy roughly $60 billion annually. Now, this has certainly come down with time as there has been the introduction of peer reviews, walkthroughs, inspections, and a full range of software testing types. These software testing types ensure that bugs are caught sooner and earlier and mitigated, and therefore cutting costs. The other part that contributes to this is this transition from waterfall to agile. Remember, waterfall, in those cases, you didn't get your bugs or find your bugs until the very end. And at that point, it costs way too much money to go back and change design and requirements. But under your agile model, you'll be able to find things a lot faster. As I mentioned, there are multiple different types of software testing. Some of the more common ones are a black box test. The system level test case that I mentioned earlier, the one that you'll be required to put in your third deliverable, falls into the umbrella of a black box test, in that it's most concerned with inputs and outputs and not necessarily what's happening in the internal, right? It's more about, can I put in an input? Does it give me the desired output? There is white box testing, also known as clear box testing or glass box testing or transparent testing. In either case, it's usually what is, for those of you that are familiar with JUnits testing, being able to look and make sure that the code is being instantiated at every branch, it's doing everything that it's supposed to do, that you don't have any dead branches or code that's not being executed, those kinds of things. Those are usually with particular focus on security implications, but white box testing has its space. You will not be required to demonstrate white box testing for your deliverable, but it's always recommended. In such cases, white box testing usually helps you to find bugs a little bit on the earlier side. Again, there are even more types. There's integration testing. That's the testing you do when you take your different parts of your product and you integrate them together to make sure everything works. My example is that everybody is usually given a piece of the pie. At some point, you have to put all those pieces together to create a whole. That's usually when you integrate them. It sounds awful messy, and believe me, it is also awful messy with software as well. There's a smoke test. Consists of making sure that the bare minimum is there in order to be able to continue on. Usually, there's like a high-level checklist associated with the system. Can you load a database? Can you start the system, right? If those things don't work, you don't go any further with the testing. System level testing, test a completely integrated system to verify that the system meets its requirements. Again, this is the one that you'll be the most focused on. And then operational acceptance test. This is usually at the very, very end. You've run all the tests there is to be done. This is the one that's going to be sort of the sign-off by your customer to ensure that it met everything you needed. There's also regression testing. This is typically when your software has moved into a maintenance mode and you're starting to make changes. And or you found a lot of bugs during the system level testing and you're making the changes to make those pass. Sometimes, as you know, with software, when you go to fix one bug, you create another. So regression testing is usually a subset of all the software tests that have been defined for that product. You may pick a handful to make sure that you hit all the major areas. This is a template for the system level test case that you'll be required to present for your deliverable 3. You'll notice that I ask you things like system test case number. So if you have multiple user stories that you're going to give test case for, again, we're going to follow the same mantra. You're going to give me as many test cases as are required to cover a sprint. So if there's more than one, you want to number them. You also want to give the system test case a name, and then you also want to identify the user story that that test case is going to represent. You want to number your steps. You want to be explicit in what steps a user needs to take in order to execute some functionality. You're going to define what the expected results are. You're going to tell me what the actual results are, and you're going to tell me if it passes or fails. So if the actual results actually reflect the expected results, then you're just going to have a pass. You'll have nothing in the actual results. However, if what happens is not what you aligned in your expected results, you're going to put a fail, and you're going to explain in the actual results what happened. This is going to allow me to be able to see, and you as well, where the bugs may be in your code. While it would be ideal to have all passes in your system level test cases, it is not a requirement. Again, in some cases, you all will not have completed functionality at the end of this semester, despite your best efforts, and that's okay. What's most important is the documentation and the process, and working together, and teamwork, and collaboration, and communication, and all that other great stuff. So that's all I have for today. I will leave it to Daniel to field any questions associated to software testing, and go do great things.